Hey guys, what's going on? I hope you're having a fantastic weekend so far. I'm super excited to be joined today by my buddy Strong Hungry Dad, who is here to answer the questions that are most upvoted that I asked you guys about a week ago, as far as your transition from the military to law enforcement. Now, this isn't just going to be about covering the transition necessarily, but also kind of talking, going into detail a little bit about the differences between military law enforcement, civilian law enforcement, whether or not you should join the military before going into civilian law enforcement, things like that. So I've actually taken screenshots of some of the most upvoted questions from you guys, and I'll be putting those on the screen for you guys to see. So first of all, welcome, Strong Hungry Dad. Glad to have you here.
Very excited.
We actually work out at the same gym, and you know, I get a good pump going, and I start lifting heavy, and I look over, and he's lifting 3 times more than what I am. So there's that.
There's a slight size difference, though.
Yeah, well, so, you know. a little bit. I need to eat more Wheaties, apparently. All right, first question comes from JKL2502. What kind of rules change as far as hands-on policies and use of force policies?
So I saw a couple of questions like this, and that's a little difficult to answer because the military law enforcement side of things kind of covers almost 2 different areas. So you've got the LE portion, the law enforcement portion, and then you have a whole nother portion which is considered ATFP, which is anti-terrorism force protection. So for me, I did pretty much a majority ATFP. I started off overseas in Bahrain, spent 2.5 years there doing that, and then I went to an aircraft carrier and did that for 2 years. So the ATFP portion, you have your justifications for the use of deadly force just like you do in civilian law enforcement, and then they're a little different. So for the military side, there are things that are considered like national critical infrastructure, which is not something that as local LE we have the opportunity or the option of kind of covering. That's not something that falls into our realm. So that's your main areas are the difference in when you get into infrastructure like ships, like water treatment facilities for forward deployed bases and stuff like that.
One quick thing, guys, I do apologize if I'm trying to mimic Scarface here, but I was rough playing with the puppy last night and I got what I deserved. Next question is from Misi Matt. What are the big differences in being a civilian police officer versus being a military police officer?
It kind of goes back to that same thing as being a military police officer. And mind you, I'm still pulling from limited experience when it comes to the military police because I did that for 5 years. And as I explained, there's a ATFP side, there's an LE side. I might catch some flack from some of my MP, MA security forces, which is just another way of saying the military police and the acronyms. The LE is not the same to an extent that you're going to get on the civilian side. Now, they are going to deal with things like suicides, domestics, drunk people, Lord, especially
I can only imagine.
Man, the drunk people, especially if you're on a ship going on deployment and hitting ports and stuff, you're going to get a lot of drunk people. But the local law enforcement side, you're really going to deal with, as you and I both know, a very broad spectrum of stuff. I mean, you could go the first 6 months and work homicide, suicide, ag assaults, armed robberies, kidnappings, missing juveniles. You're going to work that in 6 months. And to be honest, there may be some people that do a 20-year career in the military as a military police officer, and they might not see all that stuff in 20 years. So that's the biggest difference there.
So do you think civilian law enforcement is more fast-paced?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just you get more opportunity to implement your skill set. It's more common.
That makes sense. Now, when you were in, okay, never mind. I completely left my thoughts. Totally forgot.
Old age.
All right, yeah, I'm getting up there. All right, next question, one of many Davids. During the hiring process, what are some of the good things to hit on during an interview that will make your military police work experience relate to the civilian side?
So I was excited about these questions because there was a lot of them about the hiring process. And ironically, recently I've moved over to becoming the recruiter for my department. So I do the entire hiring process, which that could be, well, as you put it, in 20, 30 different videos. There's so many different things that you can go into in the hiring process. But related to the military side, just because you were in the military doesn't mean that it's every bit of as applicable to local law enforcement. But things like rank structure, discipline, time management, all of those things are what any supervisor in any line of work, obviously including law enforcement, time management can be a huge thing when it comes, reports start piling up and you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning and you're working till sometimes 7, 8 o'clock at night and you're just getting tired, but knowing how to manage that stress.
Oh yeah.
So it makes a big difference that you have that background you can pull from. Related to the law enforcement aspect, you do have understanding of use of force, use of deadly force, non-lethal weapons, depending on what branch, and mind you, a disclaimer here, every branch is different. So I was in the Navy. I was a master at arms. I did that for 5 years. Some folks may have done Air Force Security Forces or Army Military Police MP are going to have different experiences than I have. And there's plenty of stuff you can go look up on those different branches. But the use of force when it comes to like defensive tactics, the Navy didn't have so much training on that. And by so much, I mean very little. But the Army and the Air Force and the Marine Corps may have had more training on that. So keep in mind those things when you're getting out of the military and you're transitioning to civilian law enforcement, that you take what kind of comes from your experience. It's going to be different for everybody. Sorry, that monster. So I guess what I'm trying to say is ultimately it's going to be tailored to you and your experience. But keep in mind all those things you learned, the deadly force, use of force, defensive tactics, all that stuff, and sit down. Let somebody from the outside find a mentor in the civilian law enforcement side, because it is a whole new ball game, and let them look over it. Write down what you've done and let them say, okay, yes, this would be applicable. This is what I'm looking for. Mentors are just like, they're key, in my opinion.
So just a question for me, I guess, we have a yearly requirement where we have to, qualify with firearms. We have to receive training on domestic violence. This list of prerequisites that you have to meet every single year. What was it for the military? So
let me tell you, this was probably one of the most disappointing things when I got out of the military. Every branch has their online training, and ours is called NKOs. When I found out you still had to do all that online training in the civilian side, I was devastated. A lot of the online training is kind of tailored to areas away from the law enforcement, because obviously not everybody in the military is in law enforcement. I will say that the last command I was at, I was in charge of the training department. So every quarter you have to sign what's called a Lautenberg Act. A lot of people won't know what a Lautenberg Act, but it is, you can't have been convicted of a domestic violence and still carry a firearm in law enforcement capacity. So every quarter they had to sign a Lautenberg Act. They had to sign a form that says that they understand, basically that they can quote what the use of deadly force is and then your justifications for the use of deadly force. Annual firearms qualifications, just like we have in here where we are in our state, but we also had a semi-annual sustainment, which for us most of the time was a FAT simulator, or the laser gun shooting, which can be beneficial, but would like to have seen more. So that's kind of how it carries over. It's still pretty much the same as far as a lot of annual training that you have to keep up on.
All right, next question. What are the differences in people you deal with? Like in the military, does everyone respect your authority, and do you ever go to public calls or assist local police if there's a major incident? Love the videos, by the way, huge fan.
So I'm trying not to laugh when I read this one, because the respect your authority thing in military police.
Picture Cartman.
Exactly.
I'll probably put a little clip in there. Yeah.
And you will respect my authority.
We had an individual who we literally took that picture and we put their face on the card.
Really?
And it said, respect my authority.
With the department you're at, or in the military?
In the military,
Oh.
yeah. So it makes me chuckle a little bit because there's a lot of people in the military that look at military police as nothing more than rent-a-cops.
Yeah.
And that's not the case, but there are a lot of people that are military police officers that do believe they are a little more, they demand a little more respect than they actually have. And that's a big piece of advice that I give to people going into military law enforcement. Don't be a jerk, just folks are the big thing was, like I said, people getting drunk. When I was on a ship and we'd come back from port, you're going 30 days or more without having a sip of alcohol. 4 hours later, they're wasted.
Oh, yeah.
So they're coming back stumbling, there's no reason to be a jerk about it. Mm-hmm. They're having fun just like when you get off your watch and you're going out, you're probably going to be the same way. So now in reference to the public calls, that is a good question for the LE commands, the local law enforcement, or the bases that are kind of butt right up to the jurisdiction of local law enforcement. I personally haven't heard much of military police going out and answering calls with civilians. However, there are times where the housing for the base is off base. Basically, it's just kind of surrounded by civilian police. So you're traveling through those areas and you may have to run lights and sirens depending on what you're going to. And there will be times where the local police may come on your base, and that may be more common. And I'm sure folks will correct me in the comments if I'm if I'm wrong on that.
Oh yeah.
Now, overseas it is very different. Like in Bahrain, we had local police, and they were allowed very limited access to the base itself. So they typically sat on the outside of the base as more like liaisons, and they also carried, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was MP5s, but they had a steel rod in them, so they didn't actually work.
Wow,
It
really?
was just a visual deterrent. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So
I can understand that because I can see that being like a security threat.
Yeah, you have to definitely limit the access. And if you saw, a local police wandering around base, something was not right.
Next question. Do you think the military was a good stepping stone to transitioning to civilian law enforcement, or would you recommend a different route?
So I personally think the military is a terrific stepping stone into anything. Mm-hmm. Take away the law enforcement aspect, it just sets you up for success. I mean, as I've been out now 2 years and some change, and I would not be in the same situation. I see people I went to school with, and between student loan debt and local drama that they've never gone out of.
Yeah, because they never leave a small town.
Right, and it leaves them kind of, behind the curve. Yep. So the military sets you up successfully. Now, for the law enforcement aspect, I would say overall, yes, it does. It definitely helps you. Now, you come from military law enforcement into civilian law enforcement, a lot of stuff changes. For example, the laws themselves. Every state is different. So if you went from the state we're into, let's just say, Colorado, it's going to be a huge difference, and we would have to relearn a lot of stuff. Now, there is a downfall. I have seen some FTOs who do not like having prior military in their car. And the reason that is because typically prior military are, one, very opinionated, and two, kind of set in their ways. So they get in there and they think they know more than they actually do. And it causes the FTOs to be a little bit less patient with them. If they're trying to correct you. These FTOs have been doing this for a while. And though you've done the military law enforcement, it is so different. I mean, you patrolling a base and getting a shoplifting in the exchange is a lot different than an armed robbery at a Dollar General. Or,
with shots fired, yeah.
There's a huge difference. And if you think you already know the answers, you're, one, going to get yourself hurt, or worse, get somebody else hurt. So those FTOs are there to put a foot in your behind if they need to.
I wanted to read this one to you. I don't. Maybe you read it already.
Okay.
Rob Fell.
Yeah.
Did you see the comment?
I did. Yes.
Okay. All right. So Rob Fell said, I worked with him while he was an MA on my ship. I couldn't think of a more wholesome, good-hearted person to go into law enforcement. Excited to hear this one. Also, if you can, let him know his boxing skills were very unexpected.
Now, let me tell you what.
I'm assuming there's a story behind that.
Well, coming from that guy, he's a terrific boxer, man.
Really?
So when we were on the ship, you got to find different ways to work out. I hadn't gotten into strongman at that time, and I'm a bigger guy. So my entire military career, I was struggling to make sure I maintained the right body fat percentage, not get the boot. So one of the things is I talked to him and I was like, hey, you box? Can I box with you? He was a monster.
Really?
And as a matter of fact, I remember specifically we were watching the Mayweather-McGregor fight. Before that fight, there was a younger guy who was like undefeated, and he won the fight, but I don't remember the details, and forgive me for not remembering them. But he won that fight and got disqualified for something. So this guy, if I'm not mistaken, had actually boxed that guy, and I mean, he was a terrific fighter. I mean, and so talented. But let me say this too: when I saw that, it put a big smile on my face because he's a good guy, and he actually, when he got out, I got out I think before he did, and when he got out, he reached out to me and asked if I could be a reference for him for an agency in California. And anybody watching from California, hire him. I mean, honestly, he's a terrific worker. I wasn't necessarily a supervisor for him, but he worked in my department where I was a supervisor, and I mean, he was a great guy. So I really appreciate that comment, man. It made me pretty happy.
So what are the odds that he would be watching my videos and see that? You know what
seriously.
I mean? It's a small world.
Well, I think it's good odds because your videos are pretty good.
Well, I appreciate it. Next question from Zachary. Let's see. Getting out of the U.S. Navy in about 6 months, any tips, tricks for becoming a cop would be appreciated, but would you say the everyday stress of being in the military goes away, such as your supervisors not caring about your personal life because the mission comes first mentality, and just the day-to-day stresses that only we service members understand, or is becoming a cop just simply trading one uniform for another and dealing with the same day-to-day grind?
I'd have to say there's a big difference there. So my supervisor that I have right now, I've had to call him twice and say, hey, I got something going on family-wise. His first answer is family first. And this isn't me bashing the military. I said it already. I'm very glad that I did it. I would not trade having done it. However, it was mission first. I mean,
It has to be.
Absolutely, that's true. For example, a hurricane. A hurricane comes in to where I was stationed on the ship. You got to go. It's similar in this line where you got to stay, your family's got to go, but your ship leaves. If you're supposed to be a good friend of mine, we were deployed. I flew to the ship. He had already been there. While we were on deployment, his son was born. Right? Great guy, but he missed the birth of his son. There was nothing that he could do to get back for it. Yeah, so he missed the first few months of it. I mean, and it's just, that's part of it. I would say in the civilian side, and I can't speak on these large agencies, NYPD, LAPD, stuff like that. I don't know because I have never worked for an agency that large. But on a smaller scale, they're people, and you're going to have bad supervisors. There's nowhere you can go where everybody's perfect. I wish it existed, and if it does, somebody comment. Hey, let us know.
Put in an application.
Yeah.
Our next question: in today's politically charged climate, is it worth going through the process of becoming a cop? And in day-to-day police work, what does the risk versus reward assessment look like for you?
So you have to ask yourself that question. I can only answer it for me.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely worth it if you're getting into this line of work for the right reasons.
Yeah.
This is a tough line of work, and I don't mean like your hands are going to be bleeding at the end of every day, but it's going to take an emotional toll on you, a mental toll, physical toll as well, but the emotional and the mental kind of hit you earlier in your career than the physical kind of catches up to you later. But it's worth it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. You really run into the emotional side effects of this line of work and the mental side effects much sooner than you do the physical. I think that if you're getting into it for the right reasons and you have the right mindset from the first time you step out on the street and you're a representation of the agency you work for, the town you work for, and then every one of us that's in this line of work, then it's going to be worth it. I'll say this, for those bad apples, it sucks when it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I put in hours and hours of community policing, getting out. I mean, I love playing basketball with kids. It was not uncommon for me to be in the middle of a basketball court, in full uniform, running a game of 21 with, people from the city. You put in those hours and then you turn around and somebody does something stupid and
And everybody hates you.
Everybody
even though
hates
you didn't do it.
Has nothing to do with me.
All they saw was a uniform.
Yeah, and I mean, I know some folks that have saved lives, and they turn around and they're called every name under the book because of something someone else did.
Yeah.
So it's worth it for me. Now, you be self-critical and you ask yourself that question, and if you can say you're getting into it for the right reasons, not because you want to be big and bad and walk around with this badge and you want to drive fast and chase folks, which, don't get me wrong, is a whole lot of fun. I mean, it really is fun. But that shouldn't be the reason that you're getting into this.
That's a very small piece of the picture.
It is, yeah, because you know what the majority of it is sitting here doing this on the computer.
Hope you like to type.
Yeah, it's a lot of paperwork,
Yeah.
but that's just part of the job too. I mean, just find your reason, and if it's what you really truly want to do and you believe that you're willing to put the work in to make a difference, then I think the answer for you is going to be that yes, it's worth it.
All right, next question is from Brandon. How much knowledge did you carry over from military police to civilian police? Did you have to relearn a lot of curriculum, and did you have to get OC sprayed again?
First of all, yes, I had to get OC sprayed again.
Shit
and
sucks.
It was miserable because I begged. You know, I had my certification. At this point, I've now been sprayed 4 times. Well, I've been sprayed twice, but I've had OC exposure 4 times.
Blowback?
Well, so in the military, they have like different levels. And so one of them is they wipe a rag across, they spray on a rag and wipe it across your eyebrows and then make you do some PT. So that wasn't too bad, but full exposure twice, and it's miserable. I mean, that was the grumpiest I could possibly have been while I was in the academy on the day we were getting sprayed. So
I've never seen you in a bad mood, so
yeah, that was a day when, I mean, I hated everybody and everything that day.
How would you compare, and I'm sure somebody would probably ask this in the comments, how would you compare OC spray to CS gas in the chamber?
I would walk into the CS chamber probably 4 times before I would get sprayed again one time. Because I got CS in the military, then I got local law enforcement. When I got on SWAT, you had to get the exposure again.
Yeah, we did too.
So that's a story there.
Well, my commander at the time, who was your chief now, we did the CS training at the range, and instead of shooting a single round in, he put a crowd dispersal round into this like 6x6 square foot room, and then you had to disassemble your Glock and put it back together, say your name and your social before you could go, and I think I got the first letter out of my name, and dude, I was done.
Well, I did it with one other guy, and they told us exactly what we were going to have to say. So the whole time leading up to it, I was rehearsing. So I knew, the other guy, no, he did not rehearse. So he was in there gagging, couldn't remember what he was supposed to say. I walked in, took my mask off. I mean, I spit it out, and I was out the door. I mean, I prepared for that one.
Over and done with.
Yeah. Now, as far as the knowledge that you bring a good bit of knowledge. However, the disclaimer here is remember that you still have so much to learn. The knowledge that you bring is going to be, depending on what kind of military police experience you have, is going to be most applicable to things like firearms, maybe some defensive tactics, use of force, and how the whole rank structure of police departments work, because that's a big adjustment. If you see somebody who comes from the military and a supervisor walks in a room, they kind of stand up and greet them, or they step to the side, let them walk past. And then you see somebody who doesn't have that. There's just some less professionalism there. But it's never a bad thing to be professional, because it'll carry over to the road when you're out there being called everything under the sun. You can just carry that professionalism with you.
Guys, one thing I want to tell you, and I think I've kind of hit on this in another video or 2 or 12, I don't know. But keep in mind, regardless of whether you have military experience as MA, as security forces, MP, whatever the case may be, or not, you are going to spend your entire law enforcement career building upon your knowledge. You are never going to achieve 100% proficiency when it comes to this job. There's always going to be new laws that come out. There's going to be new case laws that come out that you have to learn and stay up to date with. You are never going to know everything. So don't ever go into this expecting that you already know what you need to know, and that's good enough. You're always going to be building on your knowledge, and it's good to keep that mentality because it keeps your mind open, and that will help you down the road.
Yeah, there are certain people in law enforcement that kind of tailor their knowledge more towards certain areas. For example, traffic. Folks that get into traffic, we've got more than one person at our agency that can if I have any questions about traffic, go to them. Like, they know it right off the bat. There are going to be some folks that are great at working drugs. You know, any questions about drugs, go to them. And then everybody kind of has that area where they kind of focus, and so that area you may be more knowledgeable than just about everybody else, but in another area you still need help on certain things. So you got to be humble. Yeah, you've definitely got to be humble. People are always going to know more than you. You may know more than them at times, so just make sure that you're humble in those situations.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. That is all for today. If you have any additional questions that maybe weren't answered during this video, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and maybe we can do a part 2 to this video, and I'll have Strong Hungry Dad back on the show here. He does not currently have a YouTube channel. He might in the future, but he is on Instagram and Facebook. So I will be leaving links to his channel in the description box below. I hope you guys give him a follow and a subscribe, and help show your support. So either way, Strong Hungry Dad, I appreciate you being on. Man. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
If you are not already a member, make sure to join patreon.com/officer401. Going to be doing some private live streams here for you guys soon, so make sure to join in. You also get a special rank on the Discord server where I answer your questions directly, and you also get pre-release videos. I've started doing pre-release, so before I put videos out to the public, I send it off to Patreon. Not every single video, but at least 1 or 2 a month you guys get to see before everybody else. Either way, thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Have a great week. Be safe, and I will see you guys very, very soon.